everyone. Welcome to another episode of Breaking Boundaries, the world's premier podcast for international students, or at least in the top 400 or 500. My name's John with the TOEFL program, and I'm honored today to be joined by Shane McGuire of Vanderbilt University. Shane, thanks so much for joining the pod today.
Hey, John, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and hopefully talk a little bit about life at Vanderbilt.
I can't wait. And I have to start. Vanderbilt is located in beautiful Nashville, Tennessee. But for prospective students who may not be familiar with Nashville, can you explain a little bit about where it is in the U.S. and what Nashville's like?
Sure. Yeah, I love talking about Nashville, particularly with international students, because I think a lot of times when they're looking at the United States, they're very familiar with East Coast cities and sometimes West Coast cities. And they're like, I hear about this Nashville place, but where is it? What's going on there? So we're in the southeast part of the United States. If you were to fly over to the U.S., you'd likely come in through perhaps New York or Boston, and it's about a 2-hour flight to sort of our part of the country. It's a part of the country that's known for being very welcoming, very friendly. You also get a really nice mix of all 4 seasons. Even though it is technically sort of winter in the United States right now, it is 60 degrees Fahrenheit out here today. So enjoying a little bit of that sort of spring weather in Nashville. But Nashville's a city of about 2 million people, a little over 2 million people. And that's when I read the statistics, a few days ago. It grows all the time. There are people moving here. It is the fastest growing city in the United States. So with that, there's a lot of excitement as there's like new people moving here from all across the country, all across the world. There's new exciting things going up. It very much has this sort of new city feel to it. There's always new restaurants and things going up in the city that students can get out and enjoy. And the Vanderbilt location is perfect because we are literally in the heart of Nashville. You are a mile and a half or 3 kilometers from the center of downtown. So you're literally like just outside of the downtown proper. But the city is literally right there at your doorstep. You have this beautiful contained campus, but then you can kind of walk right off into the city and kind of explore that. And students definitely take advantage of that.
I can vouch for this. I was in Nashville for a wedding a couple years ago, and my wife and I stayed in a hotel right by Vandy's campus, and I almost got lost just sort of walking along. It's a beautiful campus, so it has all the best of that traditional campus experience with the access to the city itself.
It really does. I mean, and that's the part I always talk about the most. It's like, yes, you have this traditional college campus. Like when you walk around our campus, you could almost forget that you're in a city. So it has this park-like feel. We're actually a National Arboretum. One of our fun facts, in case you were curious, we talk about having a 3-to-1 squirrel to student ratio on campus. So I always like talking about that because people are like, oh, what is that? You usually talk about student to faculty ratio. I'm like, no, we're going to talk about our squirrels. But it has that traditional campus, but then you have the access to a great city right there at your doorstep. And you don't really have to like drive into the city or take public transportation. It's literally, within walking distance.
This is so funny. Shane, I did deep research, and I had written down that Vanderbilt has a 7-to-1 student to faculty ratio, which is astonishing. But I prefer the squirrel ratio too.
Yeah, we have. I mean, and I don't want to not highlight our faculty; they're fantastic. And a 7-to-1 ratio is great, but I mean, 3-to-1 squirrels is still beating out that ratio just a little bit.
You cannot beat it. Also, a testament to the presence of trees, as you referenced.
Yes.
And Shane,
For sure.
Before we talk a little bit more about Vanderbilt, I brought a prop. I happen to be reading a book on the history of country music called
Yes.
Don't Get Above Your Raisin. And Nashville is a central figure in this book because over the last century, it's become this melting pot of bluegrass, rockabilly, rock and roll, country music. And to me, it sort of serves as a metaphor for how Vanderbilt serves international students. You've got students from more than 70 countries. But can you describe a little bit the Nashville music scene? Why is this unique in the U.S.?
Yeah, so the stereotype about Nashville is that it's just country, and technically it's the country music capital of the world. But I like to use the title like Music City, USA, because I think that better represents what you find here. So I think what's unique about it is you have kind of the full range of music here, from the live performances. I mean, you literally have a concert in this city every single night, and this could be big venues downtown. These could be hole-in-the-wall places. This could be on a random street corner. You will see it in the airport. It literally is everywhere. Sometimes I'm driving through my neighborhood and someone's just sitting on their front porch, just like singing to whoever's around. Like it really truly does ring true of having that Music City sort of feel to it. So you have the performing side, but then you also have, and it's not far from campus, you have what's called Music Row, which is where all these like recording studios are. And some of them are like in the big buildings, but there's part of it. The first time I drove by it, I expected it to be like this huge corridor of like these huge buildings. And it's actually just a bunch of like little houses that all have these like fancy recording studios. Like I almost missed it the first time. I got to the end of it. I was like, did I miss it? And then you go back and you see all these tiny little signs and the recording. So you have the music production aspect of that happening in the city as well. So almost any place you go in the city, there's a lot of artists that have moved here to like they're working some job in Nashville, but part-time they're trying to like make it in their music career as well. So just by living in the city, you'll probably learn about like the next up and coming artists before they like start to make it big. But again, I go back to it doesn't just have to be country music. Like I full confession, not a huge country music fan. I'm okay with it, but it is not my preferred genre. And I have been to so many live music concerts here in Nashville, none of which have been country music. So really, if you like any style of music, any band or artist that's touring across the U.S. will almost certainly stop in Nashville. We also host some concerts on our campus. So if you like live music of any kind, you're really able to access that easily as a student, which I think can be a fun part of your experience in Nashville.
Personal confession, I grew up in Oklahoma. I too have a distaste for country music, although in college I bought a banjo and I just kept it in my dorm. I never actually learned how to play it. It was just kind of a totem of where I was from. But I have been to Nashville for electronic music concerts, so I can attest to like pop, electronic, rock, hip hop. It's all there, and maybe you'll develop a taste for country music after a few years in town.
You might. I've been here for a decade and still, actually a little longer than a decade, and still haven't quite got the taste for it. I grew up in Kentucky, so I have grown up with country music. So I have an appreciation for it. It's just not my preferred. But yes, I mean, you can find everything. And actually, one of the coolest places here to go to a concert is a place called the Ryman Auditorium, which is like this really cool old-fashioned venue. It only seats about 3,000 people. But has incredible acoustics. And so because of the history of that place, sometimes some big time artists will want to like play there just because of that. And you're like, even if you're in the back row, you're like, I'm right here. So it's a really cool space. But yes, the live music is all around of all different genres, which is really cool.
Very cool. And the Ryman Auditorium, is it safe to assume this is a squirrel-free environment?
It is a squirrel-free environment.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But it is it's a great spot to pop into, and it's right downtown, kind of right in the midst of everything.
That's great. Well, let's talk a little bit about the university itself. As a Native American, Vanderbilt has always occupied a place in my mind as one of America's elite colleges, and it has this unique blend of extremely rigorous academic education, as well as the school is in what's called the SEC, which is the Best Athletics Conference. So there's this.
I appreciate that you said that.
Yes.
The best.
Yeah, yes. It's hard to contest at this point. But tell us a little bit more about the university and the resources available for students from overseas.
Sure. Yeah. So from an academic standpoint, and you really hit the nail on the head of like we do a great job of this balance, to striking this really nice balance with students where, yes, this is a place that will challenge you academically, will push you outside of your comfort zone a little bit, but also we're not going to lock you up in a library or a lab for 4 years. Like we want you to find that community, find that sense of belonging. We really sort of see like this developing of the student side as well. And I think our students do a really nice job of sort of navigating that. And I think the university experience is really set up for that. But yeah, on the academic side, you have, 70 majors to choose from. They're scattered between 4 undergraduate schools. You have that traditional liberal arts college sort of at the core of what we do. And then you have more specialized schools in engineering, education, and music. We also have a new school kind of on the horizon that is coming shortly, that is coming out of the School of Engineering called the College of Connected Computing, which is going to be doing even more stuff in computer science, AI, data science. Obviously, that is a huge and growing field right now, and a lot of interested. I've started talking about this, particularly abroad, because I know a lot of international students sometimes are really drawn to some of those type programs and might have interest in that. But we have a fantastic community for international students, great support for international students. One thing I think is always great to highlight is the fact that all of our students do live on campus all 4 years. It's technically a 4-year residential requirement. Some, yes, as a senior, will get permission to move off, but even those students live very, very close. So I think if you're a student coming from the other side of the world, just knowing like, hey, I have housing guaranteed, I can stay on campus, I can have that community is really sort of great for our students. We also have a fantastic international student scholars and services offices that will work with our students from the time of, once they're admitted, getting the visas taken care of, thinking about making travel plans, getting settled, kind of that whole transition to campus, really making that as seamless as possible, and then also a resource once you're here. And then there's a number of organizations revolving around international student life, around different backgrounds, cultures, identity. I mean, we have over 120, I think, cultural organizations on campus, so students really are able to sort of find that sense of belonging, which is incredibly important. We don't want to just bring in students from all across the world or all across the country, but we want them to find that home and find that place on campus.
Yeah, sure. And the school itself is a very competitive environment in the sense that everyone wants to go to Vanderbilt. And so amid that competitive environment at the admissions point, and I think it feels less so once you're on campus, do you have any tips for international students who are looking to separate themselves from the pack in order to become a Commodore?
Sure. Yeah. And before I answer that, yeah, I appreciate that you noted that, like, yes, it's competitive to get into. And that was actually something, because I didn't go to Vanderbilt for undergrad. I went here for graduate school, but I did not have the undergrad experience. So I was curious of, like, is it competitive once you're here as well? And what I found is it's really a kind of a community built around collaboration. Students really celebrate each other's successes. So that's great to hear, right? It's competitive to get into, but it's not sort of this cutthroat environment once you're on campus. But thinking about how do you stand out in this process? How do you sort of, craft that application? And I like to use the word craft because really what you're trying to do in this application, I know the US application is very different than a lot of applications across the world, and the fact that we ask you to talk about yourself more, right? We ask you for essays. We ask you for what are you doing outside the classroom? We might have specific short answers that are written to us that only come to us. So we ask you to talk about yourself a lot more maybe than some applications. And I know that can be uncomfortable and not the easiest thing. I remember when I was in high school having to write essays about myself, not my strong point. I'd much rather write a research paper. But thinking about, like, what do you really want us to know about you? Thinking about how do you take your passions, your interests, and craft that into an application, and think about all the spaces you have to tell us that story, right? You have your activity section, which is a great place to start, right? And I encourage you to really brag on yourself. I mean, anything a student is doing outside the classroom. This can be, things at home. This can be work. This can be school activities. This can be things in the community. And we also recognize, depending on where you're coming from in the world, you may have more time or less time to do these. There may be more of a focus on these than others, and we understand some of those sort of cultural nuances and context there. But you should feel like you can talk about anything you do outside the classroom. For that essay, thinking about, which regardless of the question you choose, thinking about what is that one additional thing that you want us to have insight about, a glimpse into who you are, knowing you cannot capture your whole life story, nor do I expect you to do that there. But I'm hoping to learn one more piece about your personality. And then I also have that short answer, which is very much allows you to talk about a piece of your identity or background or culture and how you might bring that to our campus, and knowing that that only comes to us. So you can be as specific as you want about Vanderbilt and how, okay, I have this part of who I am. I can see myself coming to the community. I can see myself adding this or growing in this area. Like, just know that we're going to be the only ones that see that. So you can really be very, very specific there. But really just think about, how do I tell that story? Regardless of how the decisions might play out, the best applications I read are those when I really get to the end of it. I'm like, wow, I have a true understanding of who the student is, what they're passionate about, what they're interested in, and I can really start to envision them fitting into our community.
This is fantastic advice. And I would also say that as uncomfortable as it is, and it's still uncomfortable for me, the ability to brag about oneself is still relevant when it comes time to obtain internships and jobs. And that for many students is a core goal. So refining that skill, being able to sell oneself is a skill that confers value on students beyond the admissions point as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, the application is set up to where you almost have to brag on yourself. And we're not viewing it like when I go down and look at this list of accomplishments, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm not sitting there being like, can't believe the student is telling me all these incredible things they're doing. They must think so highly of themselves. That's really not like, I want to know those things because I want to be like, wow, like this student has this passion and they decided to run with it and make an impact here. And now I'm like, wow, if I bring them to our campus, they might be able to do the same thing and they might even be able to take it to a whole other level based on what's important to us or the resources that we have. So the application is set up to like ask you these things. So we don't really view it on our end as you sort of bragging on yourself. But it is a good skill to be able to take who you are and things you've done and kind of communicate that clearly to us so that we understand your story and start to envision you as a potential fit on our campus.
Of course, a potential fit for an environment of collaboration, which I think is a great summary of the experience there at Vanderbilt. Shane, I have one last question for you.
Sure.
You have already recommended the Ryman Auditorium. I'm going to go look at the set list today in anticipation of a future trip. But we are recording this right before lunch, our time, which is always a mistake to record on an empty stomach. But if you, let's say you had an hour today to go find a lunch spot somewhere on or near campus, any recommendation for students to go taste the best of Nashville when they have time?
So how long do I have to answer this question? Because I could give you like an hour-long seminar on this, but I'll keep it short. And that's actually a good thing. I think you can come here and eat your way around the city of Nashville for all 4 years and maybe not get to like every place that you should. But one of the other stereotypes about Nashville is that we have hot chicken. So we have taken Southern fried chicken, and depending on where you go, they've thrown some level of spices. Some do the dry rub, some do the wet sauce, depending on where you go. But it is sort of a staple of Nashville, and probably the closest place to campus is a place called Hattie B's. And you can go down there, and if you're not into spice, you can just have their Southern fried chicken, but they have a bunch of different levels depending on your spice tolerance. So it can be a fun kind of local experience. If you venture truly into proper downtown, there's actually a new sort of food hall downtown called Assembly Food Hall, which actually has a collection of a lot of local places, so like some local burger and pizza and taco and like a little bit of everything. So if you're like, I kind of want a taste of a little bit of everything, like you can kind of pop down there and kind of see some really cool local establishments. And then I always recommend while you're here, Hillsborough Village is like the closest probably neighborhood to campus that really has that quintessential college town feel. It's about a 10-minute walk from where the first years live, maybe 20 minutes from kind of main campus. So it's about a 2 or 3 block stretch of just like, I mean, you'll find Jenny's ice cream, you'll find Crumble Cookie, you'll find some coffee shops. But one of my favorite places down there is a place called Fido. It is a full service kind of breakfast, lunch, coffee shop, kind of all rolled into one. And I think if you needed to get off campus to like study, grab some coffee, grab some food, that's always a fun little spot to pop in. So it's been around for quite a while. But that little area is kind of fun just to walk around because it has that sort of college town feel to it.
Now I'm hungry. I also want to double click on Jenny's ice cream. I have their salted caramel in the freezer right now, and
there's nothing better than Jenny's ice cream. Where I was thrilled when they finally opened up some chains around Nashville because I know it started in Ohio, but once we got them, now they're all over the city, and you cannot go wrong with Jenny's ice cream.
Oh, it's so good. Well, Shane, Vanderbilt has such prestige here in the States, but it's been really nice to personalize the university by speaking with you, hearing more about the collaborative environment on campus, and the fact that Nashville is more than meets the eye. There is so much there. So really appreciate your time, and thanks for sharing more about both the city and university.
Yeah, I very much appreciate you having me on here. It's great to always get to talk about Nashville and about campus, and love working with international students in this process.